Shabbat Shalom. This week we conclude the book of Leviticus. We begin the book of Leviticus with an understanding of the types of sacrifices. Then God teaches us the sacrificial service in the tabernacle, which will later become the sacrificial service in the temple. We continue on to the dedication of the tabernacle, which is followed by the national trauma of the death of Aaron's two sons, the chief priests of Israel. From there, the book continues to instruct the people of Israel on the laws of purity and impurity, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and the requirement for holiness for the people and for us. Several times in the book, we encounter this commandment: speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, "Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy." After this requirement, we have a long list of commandments that lead to holiness, such as honoring parents, observing the Shabbat, and loving your neighbor as yourself. This week, we reach the final Torah portion of Leviticus. And in closing, we, the people, are given the opportunity to make a choice. We can choose to obey the commandments, which will bring about an abundance of blessing. Or we can choose not to obey the commandments that God gave. This choice will bring a curse upon us. If you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commandments, if we keep His commandments, we get an abundance of blessing, mainly financial success, which will lead to a better life in the country, and a military advantage, which will bring us security, peace, tranquility. And of course, if we do so, we will merit God's presence among us. He will be our God, and we will be His people. But if you will not listen to me and carry out all these commandments, then we will get the exact opposite. We will get the sword, the famine, the pestilence. And if we still don't get the hint and we continue to disobey, if in spite of these things you do not accept my correction, but continue to be hostile towards me, I myself will be hostile towards you. We will descend into war, ending with destruction and exile. We read these verses from the point of view of the people of Israel before entering the promised land. Here God warns the people, keep my commandments. Do not regress morally, or the earth will vomit you out. Today we can literally mark the dates on a historical calendar on which these curses happened. The interesting thing is that 10 verses deal with the blessings, compared to 25 verses that deal with curses. But chapter 26 concludes with God's promise that He will not forsake us. He will remember the promises He made to our forefathers. And even if we go out to exile, God will one day deliver us and save us as He brought us out of Egypt. In the land of Israel, it will be waiting for us. Enemies can conquer the land. Enemies can exile us. But the land of Israel will be waiting for us. The land will flourish only when the Jewish people return and settle in it. When we were in exile, the land stood desolate and would not blossom for anyone. The land waited for us. It did not grow a tree or bear fruit throughout the period in which we were in various exiles. And today, thanks to God, after the return of the Jewish people to its land, the land of Israel is growing in a tremendous space. The prophets prophesied and said, the day will come when Israeli children will play undisturbed in the streets of Jerusalem, and all people will walk in her streets while in exile. Upon reading these prophecies, it was difficult for people to see how they would be fulfilled. The people of Israel in exile could not imagine that one day the fields of Israel would come to life and produce crops. Today, we don't need to imagine. We just need to look outside the window. We have many blessings that are promised to us in the Bible. Some of these blessings are mentioned in this week's parasha. The first verse begins with, "If with a condition, meaning that as a nation, we have the choice to follow the Lord and receive the following blessings: rain in the season in the right quantity, crops and harvest, that we will eat bread in abundance, and that we will dwell peacefully in the land of promise. God promises us good things if we obey His statutes and follow His path. This weekly parasha addresses the blessing on a national scale, is the people of Israel. And the haftarah, the weekly reading from the prophets, the blessing is more personal. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in Him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in the year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. Our haftarah is very similar to Psalms 1. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. It's almost identical to the words in Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 8. Our job here on earth is to bear fruit. God gave us many talents. God blessed us all. The New Testament gives us several lists of gifts, talents, and abilities. Every person has a role. Every person has a gift. And therefore, every member of the community should have a role, whether it's official or an informal role, such as encouragement, listening, caring for the atmosphere, prayer, or visiting the sick and the elderly. We're all organs in the body of Messiah, and we must all contribute to the community. The most important thing is that everything we do with gladness. If we do something, it must look like we enjoy doing it, that it comes from the heart. Can the congregation function at full potential when most of the audience is inactive, both physically and socially? Do we imagine a congregation where we sit, sing a little, pray a little bit, listen to the sermon and go home and that's it? We've done our duty? Is God pleased with me because I went to His house? The great question that the scriptures ask, that Yeshua asks, is, where is the fruit? I want to share with you the story of a man and his rich relative. The man begged his rich uncle for a job, but no position was fitting for him. The uncle tried putting his nephew in a few offices. The work was done very poorly, which is bad for business. The uncle did not want to fire the relative, but he also couldn't leave him in charge of an office that would eventually not function. So finally, he said, okay, you got the job at the factory. All you have to do is refrain from bothering the employees. Don't touch anything. Wait for the first of the month, then go get your paycheck. That's it. From then on, the man was happy. All he needed to do was hang around the factory, do nothing, and wait for the first of the month. One day, an inspector came to check the factory. He asked each employee about their job and received a detailed explanation of why each worker is important and contributes to the factory. Of course, every worker tried to show how important their work is to the factory. Then came the turn of the nephew. The supervisor asked, and what do you do at the factory? How do you contribute towards its success? What did he answer? All I have to do is go around the factory and do nothing, not touch anything, not disturb anyone. Wait for the first of the month, then go get my salary. One day, we will stand and give account to Yeshua. What will we say? All we did was hang around and not bother? It's no big deal to come to the congregation, to sit down and think, I've done God's will. I showed up. I sat down. I didn't disturb anyone. And I left. A day will come and I will receive my paycheck from the King of Kings. We're all God's workers, and we must actively build up the body of Messiah in the kingdom of heaven. Each of us has skills and gifts, and we must use them and contribute them to the congregation and build the community. A man had a fig tree growing in his vineyard, and he went to look for fruit on it, but he didn't find any. So he said to the man who took care of the vineyard, "For 3 years now, I've been coming to look for fruit on this fig tree, and I haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should it use up the soil?" "Sir," the man replied, "leave it alone for 1 more year, and I will dig around it, fertilize it. And if it bears fruit next year, fine. And if not, then cut it down." God cares for us. He waters us. He invests in us. What is left for us to do is to cling to God, to His Word, to His path. And God will plant us by streams of living water. As He promised, living water that does not run out or run dry. The goal is for us to produce fruit, to help each other, to support each other, to implement steps that build the kingdom of heaven and respect God. This choice is also a national one for all of Israel to live according to God's word, but it's also a personal choice to personally draw near to God's word, to personally invest and lift up the family and the community, both personally and nationally. We must choose to be holy every day. It is not an easy choice, but it is choosing life. And that's it. We finished the book of Leviticus. What is left for us to say is a traditional blessing. Chazak chazak v'nitchazek. Shabbat shalom to everyone.